And Kyle, when you're ready, do you want me to open the waiting room, or do you want to do it?
So I will admit all. I never get to do that, so why not?
Go for it.
First for everything. But I don't know how many other events I'm going to manage at school. So I could admit all, but we're probably gonna have to continue pressing admit all, like again now. So I will do that.
I can also disable the waiting room.
I don't know if that's gonna create any issue. I don't want it to turn off the waiting room per se, and I don't mind pressing the admit all button. Okay. Okay, okay, Cindy, you have the ability to press admit all, so you'll handle that going forwards. Okay, we'll wait another minute. Okay. Aaron, just so you have some context, right now we have over 175 people who have joined us, and we're exceeding 200. Okay, for everyone joining us, we thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll start in just 2 minutes as our waiting room is still growing. Yep, it's still exploding. So we're gonna give it another minute. Okay, so a lot of people have their videos on, which is great. And we encourage you to have your video on, but fully respect if someone would like to turn their video off at any point. We understand that. Okay.
Say she looks like that little girl.
That's it. Yeah, I saw that.
Each time I get up, I look at it.
Okay. So I'm going to do this. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can I get a...
Hello.
I don't think they can hear you yet.
They can hear you. They can hear you. No, it's great.
I could hear you.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I see you on the little picture.
Good. Okay. So welcome everyone. We appreciate you for joining us tonight. Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As many of you know or experience, especially if you grew up or have worked in the United States, this moment in history is normally commemorated in the US in April. There's different historical reasons for why, and January 27th, which was an important day during the Holocaust at the end of the war, is the reason why many countries in Europe celebrate this day as the end and as well as the Remembrance Day. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. There we go. So our agenda for tonight is to review kind of the My Take setting. It's a new semester, just want to understand our forum. A brief historical review of Europe in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. We have a guest speaker who many of you have already heard, Aaron Vegh, who goes by Zaidi, which is a Jewish term of endearment in Yiddish for grandfather. Afterwards, we'll have a student speaker, Matt Kahn, who is a RC in Section B, and will speak about his family's experience in the Holocaust, as well as how it affects our generation. And lastly, we'll have some closing remarks and open discussion. What we have an advantage to tonight is that the school has provided the wide system to use Zoom, so it doesn't have to end. If people would like to stay to ask any questions or have a discussion, we'll be here. And as well, if anyone would like to talk kind of one-on-one or in a smaller setting, that of course can be arranged in the coming weeks, just please reach out to me. So this is a normal My Take setting, is confidentiality, privacy, and respect. We're gonna have one small adjustment tonight. So normally what's said within a My Take setting is confidential and we don't share that externally. The point of today of Remembrance Day is to do the exact opposite. So we ask you all to discuss, to learn, to explore what happened in history, how it affects us, how it should never happen again. And therefore that piece is really nixed from tonight, and everything that is shared is really for you to discuss. What we will ask is that you find a respectful way, both tonight and in the future, to engage on this topic. It's a very intense topic, and please keep that in mind. As well, after I present the historical piece, which is what we're gonna do next, and I'm gonna do it a little thematically. So it will be historical, but it'll be across certain themes that happened in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Afterwards, Aaron will speak. And if you have any questions you would like to ask him, we're gonna do it. Just send me the question and hopefully I'll be able to see that. If not, Cindy from the SAS is with us and she'll read them out when we get to a Q&A afterwards. The Holocaust. The Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. In 1933, Jews lived in every country in Europe, over 9 million in the countries that would eventually be occupied by Germany in World War II. Between 1933 and 1945, 2 out of every 3 Jews in these countries, 6 million Jews, were murdered. Millions more people, Roma, physically and mentally disabled people, gay and lesbian people, and political prisoners were also murdered. The world sat silently by. This is the topic for tonight. I want, as it seems that almost everyone's here, in the historical setting, there will be a few points where some pictures are displayed. Both the orated content and the visuals are graphic in nature, and just wanna give you that heads up. Cindy, are we recording?
Yes, recording has started.
Great, thank you. The historical review. So just in terms of framing this, so this is a part of what happened, but it's not every detail. And as well, the framing tonight will include some historical components, both of the war and the Holocaust, which are not the same thing. For further research, or if you would like to look anything up on your own, and all of this information was taken from these sources, was the USHMM, which is the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, and Yad Vashem, which is in Israel. So the first piece of the historical review is Adolf Hitler's rise to power and the rise of Nazism. It really starts way before the war. So in 1919, Adolf Hitler publishes his first comments on how to handle the Jewish problem, which is his view of the plague that is beseeching Germany and the world. In 1923, he tries to push out the government. He gets arrested. He serves prison time, and he writes Mein Kampf, which many of you are aware of his writings, which really start rallying his support. Hitler becomes the leader of the Nazi Party in 25, and then he's appointed the Chancellor of Germany, which is the head of Germany at the time, in 1933. Continuing his rise and the rise of Nazism. So in 1933, he has taken power and he starts persecuting everyone who disagrees with him. So political prisoners are sent to Dachau, which is the first concentration camp. It is made in the beginning for political prisoners and later expands to all people that the Nazis don't like. Nazis start attacking communities that they disagree with. So they start forced sterilizing individuals with mental disabilities. They start enacting laws that preventing Jews from going to public schools or working in the government. And they start enacting laws and persecuting members of the gay and lesbian community. And in 1935, the Nuremberg laws are instituted, which distinctively separate the Jews from the rest of the population, and set a stage for what will be the Holocaust. The start of World War II, so just to give some context, so in 1936, Germany hosts the Olympics. And everything I just said until now has already happened. All that happened, and then they host the Olympics. Jesse Owen runs, wins, competes. And this is really the Nazis trying to promote Germany as this strong new nation and kind of putting aside everything they're doing to the Jews and anyone else. Germany then annexes Austria in 1938. And then afterwards, really starting the war is in 1939, where Germany invades Poland. Britain and France from the end of World War I have a pact with Poland, so they react and declare war on Germany, and World War II has begun. Before I get into the next section, which is about anti-Jewish violence, ghettos, and concentration camps. So I'm just raising a flag here that after the content, there will be some images. I just also want to raise a point. In the 1920s and 1930s, Jews were very involved in Germany. And that's really an understatement. They were doctors, they were philosophers, they were engineers, they were lawyers. There are 500,000 Jews in Germany, which seems like a lot, but that's less than 1% of the population. So Hitler's now been preaching for 20 years about the problem of the country, which is 1% of the population, almost all of whom are educated and members of society. And Jews are very assimilated, which is a separate conversation we can have about religion and religious practice, but Jews are much more German than they are Jewish. There's no real comparative to being German or Israeli because Israel is a mandate at this point. And so they're very, very German. They marry their non-Jewish German colleagues and friends, and they're very involved in society. And so on that backdrop of what's happening, right, this then happens, okay? November 9th and 10th, 1938 is what's called Kristallnacht, which is the Night of Broken Glass in translation, which is a nationwide attack of Jews on Jews carried out by Nazis. And this is where the Nazi Party starts pushing the violent agenda towards Jews to a new level. Before they'd been segregating Jews, now it's a new level. In 1940, Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest death camp, is established. Over 1 million people will die here before the end of the war in 1945. Almost 500,000 Jews are forced to live in the Warsaw Ghetto starting in about 1940, which is 1.3 square miles. Most die from lack of food, lack of water, dysentery, and those who don't are killed later on in the war by force. In 1940, Nazis begin deporting Jews to Eastern Europe for extermination. So there's a clear plan to kill all Jews that the Nazis have control over, and they start deporting Jews from all across Europe for everywhere where they've taken control. And in 1941, Chelmno, which is a death camp, is the first place where poison gas is used to systematically kill people and kill Jews. This is the beginning where it was propaganda. Nazis burn Jewish books and books they oppose in a celebration in major cities across Germany. As the late 30s and early 40s occur, Nazis round up children, women, men, and send them to concentration camps. Now, it's important to note there's a difference between concentration camps, death camps, and labor camps. And there's in particular why those words are used for different camps. And many of them were conjoined. So a camp would be both a concentration camp and then separately the people who showed up to a concentration camp and were deemed unfit, they were, too young, too old, or just should be killed, were sent to the death camp and killed in generally gas chambers. This is a picture of children behind barbed wire at a concentration camp.
Zwillinglager.
Concentration camps and the killing centers. So from 1939 to 1945, the Nazis first start by taking Jews out into forests, having them dig holes in the ground, having them strip off their clothing, and then taking mobile kill squads and shooting them, and then pouring, the dirt back on and covering up mass graves. This is used to kill 1.5 million people. Then in the coming years, the final solution, which was the Nazi plan to annihilate all Jews, the final solution to the Jewish problem, they start building concentration camps and death camps where millions more people will be murdered, and using gas to murder these people. This is a picture taken by Nazi Germans from their photos of a mass grave. This is a picture within the barracks of what happened and the people turned into from the situation of being starved to death in the concentration camps. So if you were not sentenced to death immediately, as you will hear about by our speaker tonight, you most likely starved to death. Liberation. June 1944, Allied forces from the West and Soviet forces from the East begin major offenses against German forces. In 44 and 45, Soviet and Allied troops encounter concentration camps and liberate and the remaining survivors. And Germany surrenders in 1945. A lot of what we firmly know in concrete terms about the Holocaust comes from the fact that when the Allied forces crossed through the concentration camps, the scene was so horrific and so, in human terms, incomprehensible that the US forces were told to document everything they could with pictures, with videos, with testimonies, and collecting all the documentation, which you can see and read about both online and at museums around the world. This is how the war ends for many people: behind barbed wire, starved nearly to death. This is the setting they'd been living in for many years. Children, women, men of all ages. Those who were not killed were subject to some of the horrors that I mentioned tonight. And since I cannot put those really into words, we asked someone to join us tonight to speak of that experience. I'll say that the reason I asked Aaron Vegh to join us tonight, 10 years ago, with a group of friends, I went on a trip, if you can call it that, to Poland to see what happened with my own eyes. And Aaron's grandson, who's running and managing the trip, asked him to come. It was the first time in 60 years that he returned, or almost 70 years, that he returned to Poland. So I was on that with him on that experience, and heard firsthand from him in Poland as we went through the mass graves, through the concentration camps, and through the death camps about his experience. He has a profound story, and I hope that you can hear from his experience and we can all learn what there is to learn from it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and ask Aaron, would you mind sharing with us your story?
Okay. I was born in the Carpathian Mountains. When I was born, it was Czechoslovakia. In 1939, Hitler gave that piece of dirt to the Hungarians, and soon the Hungarians marched in. They put the obstacles for the Jews. They started with no stores, no everything. And if you had a store, you had to be open on Saturday, and so on and so on. Where I was born was a village. The village was mostly Romanians. The Romanians do not use nothing from civilized world. They make their own clothes, and so on and so on. And everybody had a cow and a little born, and that's how they live. And some people have little stores, but there was no employment, and they except shoemakers, tailors, carpenters. They had their little business and they make a living. We had a couple of stores in the village, but there was no stores for clothes, for shoes, for anything. If you want to buy flour, nails, something like that. So then they came up with a new censor that all the Jews must produce citizenship paper. Now, if you're born, we had town halls, they gave you you're born there, you're a citizen of Hungary. If not, they deported you. During the First World War, where the war was brewing in Poland, some of the Polish Jews ran over to order section, and they lived there. They couldn't produce a citizenship of Hungary. In 1941, I remember they get them together, took them, put them on wagons, and took them to the border. We were not far from the Polish border, and they pushed them over to the Polish side. And what happened, I cannot tell you. As soon as they got on the other side, they tortured them, they killed them, they beat them until they got to Lemberg. Today it's called Lwów. The second transportation, they got together, my father organized, paid them money, and they left us alone. And then they drafted my father, and Jews were not able to be in the Hungarian army. They were only drafted in civilian clothes and had a yellow band on their arm. And he was shipped out from Hungary to Ukraine to dig the bunkers for the soldiers. It wasn't long after it that we heard rumors that my father is dead. Well, everybody in the village knew already my father was dead except us. Then an officer from the Hungarian army who was managing the Jews came. He wanted to collect some money. He claimed my father borrowed money from him, and he came to get it. Then we found out my father is gone, he's dead. When they pushed the Germans back from Stalingrad, St. Petersburg, the Germans had the roads, the main roads. The Hungarians had to work on the fields, and the Jews didn't even have that. I don't know that. That's what I heard. My father caught typhus. Typhus gives you temperature. They dumped him in a barn. Somebody stole his boots, and when the Germans were pushed out from that area too, Germany burned the barn down with all the Jews in there. Now, life goes on. My mother was very difficult for her. She was a very independent woman because she all the time made a living on her own. She had a store, what we call a liquor store. when a guy comes out from the church on Sunday, because most of them lived in the mountains, he came in and bought himself a shot of liquor or a beer and so on and so on. We couldn't have anything, no stores. Then we only lived from nature. That means what we could grow our own vegetables, our own wheat, and so we lived. My mother went a little, what can I say, a little bit off, because she had a different life and she has four kids. And we were there. One time came the police from door to door to the Jews. They got a report with the school, in the yard of the school. And they got to bring some worthy things to give to the state. So my mother brought silver candlesticks. Some of them brought that cheap junk. And from there, we took our own horse and wagon and took us to the ghetto. And we left everything open there. We left one place where we had 80 milking cows. From that, we made a living. And we took us to the next big town into the ghetto. Now, the Hungarians are mean people. They're very mean people. The Czechs were gentle people. We were in the ghetto. We couldn't walk on the main street. We got to just walk behind the houses. And then came one day, my uncle was brought with the police because he was in the next town pretty well-to-do. And they knew the well-to-do Jews got money, and they beat the heck out of him until before they deported him. He came, he dug up and gave him some money, whatever he found. Then they didn't even let him see his wife and kids. They took him back to the next city in the ghetto and loaded him up on the train, and he shipped them out to Birkenau, Auschwitz. Then came us. They had to liquidate our ghetto. Everybody had to report to the area where the radar stage was, and they had planks to climb into the cattle wagon because he didn't have any couches. And there they chained the field police. They were managing the border. They were very rude. And each time if somebody didn't walk too fast, they used to hit him with a rubber hose, and it had wires in it. Then when the train was loaded up full of people, it was even my grandmother, 76 years old. They locked us up. No sanitary, no food, no nothing. The train was taking us from our area till Kassel. Kassel was the biggest city, the second biggest city in Slovakia. Over there, the Hungarians disconnected their locomotives and took them back. And the Germans brought in their own locomotives that continue us. From there, that continued us, and we were going through the Tatra mountains until we got to a point that was a three 3-day hike until we got to the point where we see trains with military cannons and all this going. My aunt was born in the same area where I was. The only thing, her population was the Schwab Germans, and they spoke German. And she spoke a beautiful German. So she saw one officer on the train. The train was parked. And she asked him with kind word if he could give some water because the little kids are thirsty. He was very polite and answered it. In 20 more minutes, you will have all the water in the world. It took another 25 minutes. We came to a place, a brick built wall, and off the wall it has a round arch for a train to go through it. And on the wall is written, Arbeit macht das Leben frei. Work makes your life free. Soon as we got into that camp, it divided to two tracks. And they have the German shepherds barking like heck, and they had a band playing, the best players from Paris. And it was noisy, you couldn't even hear yourself. And the German says was hearken, raus, raus, out, out. The Canadians, they were Jews interned, but they said that from Canada, that's why they call them Canadian, opened up our trains, and they told us, just take something in your hand. Don't take nothing with you because we will deliver it to you, your barrack. They unloaded us. The adults, men and women, stayed to the right. Women, children, all people to the left. To the right, we walked towards the front, and there was Mengele. He had a little rod, and he shoved it right, left, right, left. For anybody he didn't want, he sent them to the left side. I got lost from my mother. I wasn't the best obeying child, and I wound up in the right side. I got there, he looked at me, then he let me go to the right side with the working people. The rest of them went straight down the line, and they had to undress themselves on open area, and then they pushed them into a building from cement, and they locked the door up with very tight door, and then they had openings on top on the roof, and the Germans threw in cyclone gas, and gas is a very miserable way to die. After they stopped screaming, the prisoners, like myself, I wasn't dead. The old timers opened up, they took out all the bodies. You took them to a house, and they opened up your mouth to see if you got gold teeth or anything else. They have gold teeth, and knocked it out, and then they took you right on that little wagon into the crematorium. I was only 13 years old. I cried the whole time. I want to go to my mother. I never was away from my village. After 3 days, a man saw me. He spoke a Litvish Yiddish, not a Polish Yiddish. He told me, the waste on the chimney where the flame is going 20 feet above the chimney. This is where the mama is. Oh, I wouldn't believe it. Who the hell could take people and just burn them? I cursed them, but it didn't help. He came back. They sent us to a bathhouse. They sprayed us with a chemical. If you had hair, they cut the hair off. And they put us in the barracks. In the barracks, there was 3-story bunk beds. I was in a middle one. This was the best location. And we were there, and every morning, 5 o'clock, you had to go out on a pail, and they counted you. And after that, they gave you breakfast, black water, and sometimes a sliced little piece of thin bread. Most of it was sawdust. And we were allowed to be outside for an hour. Then we went back in to be locked up in the barrack. And so the adults who they took, they went out within 2-3 days to work, because industry demanded working people, but nobody wanted kids. But Mengele still didn't want to liquidate the kids. He held on to them. We got sick. So they moved us to the last camp. There was many camps in there that were all separated by wire. And the last of the camp was original for gypsies. When I got there, the kids were playing ringa, just like kids. And after about a couple of weeks, they took the adult men away, and adult women went to work, and they liquidated women and children. Since we were sick, they were afraid for typhus. They put us in 2 barracks. They gave us a little better food. What is the food? And the soup what they gave was a piece of cabbage. After that, they let a rumor out. All the weak children are going to go to work on a kartoffel farm, a potato farm. It sounds beautiful. You can at least eat potatoes, but don't eat raw potatoes. That's the worst thing for you. And so to have a selection, and I went 3 of them. One of them was Yom Kippur Eve. We went down, they put up like a door frame. Perfect. And you had to reach a certain height, and you took your shirt off to see how much flesh you on the bones, huh? I flunked, but they didn't enforce it, the separation from the weaklings to the other kids. So I snuck back to the healthy kids. I don't know, something told me, I'm here, I don't want to look for no new thing. I snuck back, and when we got back to the barracks, it was already, the stars were up. We got the pieces of bread for supper. And if you would have heard the cries from us, I can't say, I'm not supposed to say it. If there is something above, I should have fell down. No, nothing. We went back, he ate and went to sleep. The weakling children went back to a separate barrack, but they were locked up. They couldn't walk out in the morning. Not at all. We got permission to go out, the pals, they counted us. Then we went, there was in the back of the camp latrines. So in my bunk bed was two brothers, Mendel and Alter Adler. Mendel was around 16, 17 years old. He was a big husky kid. Alter was a little skinny boy, so he went with the weaklings. But they did not let him out. The boys already in there all knew that they're going to the crematoriums. Now the barracks from the camp were made from wood. And there is a little space between the wood, you know, so you could go down and at least talk them. So Alter was crying. Mendel geht mich verbrennen. Mendel, they're gonna burn me to death. Mendel couldn't take it. He went over to the capo. Look, let my brother out and I'll take his place. So he did. Alter survived after the war, and he also came to America, met him in America. Mendel went to the crematorium, and no more. And so on. After then, the last ghetto came from Lichtenstadt. Today it's called Lodz. And they, 90% of them went to the crematorium because they were all skinny. They just skin and bones. After that came, and there is no demand for us, for the kids. Around circus time, there came a German officer. He needs 50, 60 kids to do some work. They loaded us up on a dump truck and took us to Gleiwitz. Gleiwitz is only about 20, 25 miles from Auschwitz. And Gleiwitz is a coal town. They make coke. And we worked there to dig ditches because they were building new buildings. So heavier a building is, deeper the foundation must go. So we had to go down 15 feet, and they didn't have any trackers until it got real cold. And real cold, you can't dig because the ground is frozen. So then they gave us a job to keep the buildings that were built already, and the concrete is finished, warm, not to freeze. Cement freezes up to 60 days. It's still water in it. So that's what we did. And we did. And we worked there, and all of a sudden, you start hearing explosions, Katyushas. The Russians got pretty close. They took us all, not only our ghetto, our camp, all the camps, and made them walk. And it was snowing. The snow there is like a big, like a little ball. And we walked in the whole day. At night, they put us in a hay barn, pushed us in, locked us up there. In the morning, we had to go again, appel the conduit. And before they went out, they went with their bayonets on the rifle to poke into the hay. As nobody's in there. From there, we walked another day until we came to a railroad station that had 10 railroad tracks. That's a big thing. I think it was Katowice, I'm not sure. In Katowice, they had trains lined up. They were half a freight car, without a roof. They put us in.
Okay, go ahead, finish.
We had no roof, 200 in a car, you had only standing room. No food. The only food we had is the snow from heaven. And you had guards on both sides of the train. And they took us, and we, from there, looking for us where to dump us, because they didn't want to shoot all of us. So we traveled there for 3 weeks with no food. Now, if they, in the train, you could only stand so many hours a day. After that, you automatically fall. Once you fell down to the ground, you were dead because the person stampeded on you. So after 3 weeks, we had enough room in that wagon to take a walk. And what we ourselves did, somebody died, we pushed them through overboard. And we went from camp to camp, from Oranienburg and this wing. And we went through Czechoslovakia. The Czechs never threw them bread. And then we jumped to catch the bread. So we killed some more of them. And they tried to take us to Austria. Austria had camps too. Well, they didn't find any room for us. We wound up in a camp, Flossenburg. That was not a camp. It was a jail for German sadistic murderers. They were brutal. And we were there, and they used to beat the heck out of us. See, I got 2 horns here. This is what they done for me. But they had some Russian war prisoners there too, and they gave us a little protection. No food, no nothing. You had to fetch food for yourself. In the beginning, we went out to work into town. For that, we got another piece of bread, 10 o'clock. Finally, when the Americans got closer, they didn't do it. No food. I found out where the garbage can from the kitchen is, and I figured out how to crawl in there, and I lived it, and I ate. I found something what to eat. And then one day they called out, all Jews got to report to the main square. We all reported. We walked through the town, a nice old-fashioned town, to the railroad station. And the railroad stations, they loaded us up on open cars. And in the middle, they had 3 Gestapos. Well, soon the train started to run. The Gestapo sat down and started to eat breakfast. That German smelly cheese and so on. And we could only look. All of a sudden, planes came. Ba, 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 ba. American flyers shot the plane. The Germans run out like a lightning. The German guards went out. I went out too. Not only me, all of them. But before I went out, I helped myself. A bread, a can of liverwurst, candles, and some stinky cheese. Soon as I got out onto the ground, a guy came over and said, give me some. I said, do you want some? Go into the He says to me, if you don't give me, I'm going to report you. Then I didn't care one way or another. So he did. He reported me. But I wasn't that dumb. I took my hat and turned it upside out, my jacket upside out, and didn't go back to my train, went to another train. The Germans went through from person to person, but he didn't recognize me. So the train started to move again and didn't last 2 minutes. The Americans came in and said good morning with the planes. They unloaded us and we started to go on the death march. The death march was a miserable walk. It was April, it was raining, no food. And once you rain, you get wet, the old clothes got wet. The adults couldn't keep walking. They start to swivel from left to right. They shot them and threw them in the side where the rainwater went. I, as a 14-year-old boy, kept up with it the last minute. And we came the last minute, they put us in a hay barn, and that's it. In the morning, lined us up, start the candles. All of a sudden, I see the SS dumping himself to the ground. I don't know what that means. Then I found out, I see tanks with a white star, 5 points. And he disappeared. That was the Americans came in, and I got liberated in a little town, Ruring, an open field. And then I had trouble again. What am I going to do now? I didn't know where to go. So one German woman was emptying out her house because it was hit by some fire. I said, give me some bread. She says, help me this or get bread. I helped her one time, and then I saw where the bread is. I took all the bread, tied my pants up in the bottom, and I had plenty of bread. Then from there, the American MPs took over, started to make order. They couldn't control, there was a lot of Russians there. They couldn't control them. They take us and loaded us up on American trucks and took us to Leipzig. Leipzig was already the Russian zone. There was nothing, no monkey business. They didn't ask you where you are, who you are, food. They put you on a train and go. Wherever that train goes, goes. So that train went to Russia. But every 4 hours, the train had to park for 2 days because the Russians were stealing industry. And they were taking it back to Russia. And we had no food. And I was a young boy. I went out and I back for food. And I all the time got a piece of bread because we were in Czechoslovakia down there. From there, we went to Bratislava. Okay. In Bratislava, we got the station. A whole line of Russian soldiers stayed there.
Dad, can we show them a picture?
Yeah.
This doesn't have your other.
This is the only picture I have for my family.
And one kid is missing. Yeah.
One kid is missing, a little girl.
And then we can show them this picture.
This is me. This is my older brother who went with my mother. This is my little sister.
And we can show them this picture. Oh, I'm not sure we can get any clarity. No, it's not coming out real well.
Well,
but,
I have.
Okay.
I have no pictures. from Bratislava, we went to Budapest, and Budapest, we had plenty of food.
They're going to take questions, Dad. You're going to take. I just want to show you. This was taken 5 years ago. Can you see the picture on the wall?
Yes, we can.
That is a product of Mr. Aaron Vegh. Okay. So now you can take questions.
Aaron, we thank you so much for sharing with us your story. We have a few questions for you. What I'm going to do is
any question.
I'm going to call on the person who asked it, and I will ask them to raise their Zoom hand so that I can unmute you, because I don't have a better method for this. So Ashley, could you raise your Zoom hand? Ashley.
Okay.
That should work. Ashley, you have the mic.
Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for being.
Ashley, and to everyone else, please speak very loudly and clearly into your computer if you ask a question. Very loudly.
All right, is this better?
Yes.
Thank you for being here. My question for you is, how have you been able to see good in the world after experiencing such a traumatic beginning of your life?
How have you been able to see good in the world after that beginning in your life?
You have no choice. You have no choice. I floated around for a year, slept in empty buildings, and then you make a decision. What are you going to do? You got to do it. It's not easy to commit suicide, you know. It takes a lot of courage to commit suicide. And then the Joint picked me up, and the Joint put me in a home with other boys. And from there, the Slovaks are also no good, tried to break in and hurt us. So we came to America. I had no relatives in America.
Felipe, can you raise your hand?
What?
Felipe is going to ask you a question.
Oh.
Hey, Sadie. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this incredibly emotional and impactful experience. It certainly makes me feel more thankful and appreciative of what I have. Regarding that, my question is, after this experience, what is the thing or person or activity that you appreciate the most in your life?
After going through what you've gone through,
yeah.
What is the most pleasant experience? What do you enjoy most? I think I got that right, Felipe?
Yes. What do you enjoy most in life?
You know, this is a hard question. A hard question. No, I had never, in my situation, it was all compulsory. I had to go to work every day because I didn't have what to eat. And when I had kids, I had to go to work because the kids was not what I wanted. I didn't like what I did. But I did do it for the kids. And thank God I didn't do too bad. I didn't do too bad. But I didn't do nothing personally for me. It was not my most important thing was that nothing will happen to my children what happened to me. That was the biggest wish I had.
William, will you raise your hand?
What?
William is going to ask you a question now.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Good evening. My question really is, what do you wish those of us listening on the phone, listening and calling in, as leaders of tomorrow, what do you wish for us to do in the world?
I will tell you that a little things. I was born a Jew. I'm going to die a Jew. I want the world to recognize that we are floating around already for 2,000 years from country to country. You kill us, we're still around. You make your mind up that whatever you have, you took from us and leave us alone. Medicine, everything. Like the king from Morocco says, let's bring the Jews back because they bring business, commerce. That's all I wish. When I see an anti-Semite, doesn't even know what the hell he does. If I wouldn't be afraid for the law, I would take a gun and shoot him myself.
Zadie, this is, you met my wife Samara.
Hi, Zadie.
And she wants to ask you a question.
Zadie, I have a very important question to ask you that a lot of people here might not know about. People here might not know that when Jews were sent to the camps, they were dehumanized to the point that they were not even called by their names anymore. They were called by numbers that were tattooed on their arms forever. Because many people here have never met a Holocaust survivor, I think it's important that they see the number that was tattooed onto you. That they know that this really happened.
We're not saying it.
Other side of the arm.
Zadie was called this number in the camps. He was not even called by his name.
Zadie, what's your number?
B 10,529.
Thank you for sharing that, Zadie.
Zadie, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us your story. We can only say thank you for being so open with us. And we hope that in future years, you'll be able to join us in person and we can speak about both history and good things about your family. And we want to thank you and your daughter and your entire family for giving their time to us tonight and sharing with us your family story. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So at this point, Zadie, if you want to stay, we are happy to have you stay with us. We understand it's very late. We are going to have one of our classmates share from his family's experience. And if you would like to stay, you can, but we know it's very late. So you and your daughter can decide on that. But thank you so much for being with us.
You can leave now. Somebody else is going to be presenting from his family story. Okay?
I'll maybe go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Goodbye.
I'm just going to the men's room.
Okay.
I shall return.
Sounds great.
8 o'clock. The chicken go to bed 8 o'clock.
So I appreciate you all staying and listening. I know it's been late. We have a classmate of ours who is going to share. And then afterwards, for anyone who would like, many of us will be staying to discuss what we heard and what we saw. But I will now turn it over to Matthew Kahn.
Hey, Kyle, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much to Zadie and to Cindy and Kyle for organizing this. This is, that was incredibly moving, obviously. And so I'll speak for a couple of minutes about my family's experience. I'm obviously not a Holocaust survivor, but I was fortunate enough to be raised by one. My father was a Holocaust survivor and his immediate family was fortunate enough to escape. So I'll speak a bit about their experience and sort of what he impressed upon me after having lived through that. So he was born in Germany in February of 1922 in a town called Saarbrücken, close to the French-German border. a few years after he was born, his parents had a brother, Jules, who was actually still alive. My father passed away in 2016. He was 94, lived a good long life. His brother is still around. And they, as Kyle was mentioning earlier, were very assimilated German Jews. They thought of themselves as German first and Jewish second. They were very proud to be German. Until the day my father died, he was very German. He spoke with a German accent. He had German customs. The parts of his personality that he was probably most proud of, he would identify with being German. He was organized and on time and fastidious and had great attention to detail, and all of those things he identified as being part of his Germanness. And so they lived very sort of normal middle class lives. And obviously things from the time my father was born in 1922 until he left in 1939 became increasingly difficult. So in 1933, as Kyle mentioned in his slides, he wasn't allowed to go to school anymore. So he was 11 years old. That was the most education he ever got. He never got to go back to school. So his parents sent him to Frankfurt, a couple hundred miles away, which is the closest, largest city to where they lived, to learn how to become a plumber, which was sort of would have been unexpected for them. My grandfather was a business person. My father expected to finish middle school and high school and go to college, but he thought he needed to learn how to do something. So he went to Frankfurt. My uncle was still too small to go to school, and he spent a few years there until Kristallnacht, which, as Kyle was mentioning, the night that many German or Jewish businesses and synagogues were burned. And so the Gestapo, the secret police of the Nazi Party, came to my grandparents' house to take my father and his father, my grandfather, to a concentration camp. Fortunately, my father was in Frankfurt. They took my grandfather, but my father saw what was happening in the streets in Frankfurt. This was happening in cities all over Germany, where Jews were being dragged through the streets and beaten. The stores were being burned down. The synagogues were being burned down. And so he was living in a boarding house with a roommate who was also Jewish, and they were terrified. And so they wanted to go home. They were both from similar areas close to each other. My father had a train pass that he had been using to go back and forth to visit his family, and his roommate had a motorcycle. So my father wanted his roommate to ride him back. He thought that would be best, and his roommate was too afraid. So my father traded his roommate his train pass for his motorcycle. The roommate went to the train station, was picked up by the SS and sent to Dachau, and eventually died in Auschwitz. My father spent 3 nights riding in the dead of night through the woods back home to find his parents' house torn apart. The Gestapo had taken his father to Dachau, raped his mother, and beaten his brother. He didn't know exactly what to do. His mother wouldn't talk. She was catatonic, and basically had to figure out what to do from there. So he decided to sell everything that our family owned to try to raise enough money to get visas to get out of Germany. And while he was doing that, he was fighting with his mother because his mother was too afraid for him to go to the Gestapo office to submit the paperwork and the money to get out. And so he eventually won that fight. He went to the Gestapo office and to sort of the lion's den to present them with the paperwork and the money that he had raised. They beat the crap out of him, threw him down the stairs, but they took the paperwork and the money. He had no idea whether that would work or not. Meanwhile, he was going to the train station every day, hoping that his father would come home. And as he liked to tell the story, his mother couldn't deal with him going to the train station, coming home every day and being so disappointed, and eventually forced him to stop going. And the way that he told the story was the first day he stopped going it was when his father came home. And so my grandfather, being the proud German that he was a highly decorated officer for the Germans in the First World War, and had won a medal called the Iron Cross, which, as he described it, is like the equivalent to the Medal of Honor. So he was a German war hero. And because of that, in sort of a ironic twist, for his service to the German people and to the German country, they let him go. And fortunately, they were able to secure visas and get out. They left Germany in December of 1939 and landed on Ellis Island in January or February of 1940. My grandparents both had four siblings. They all had lots of children. More than 25 members of my close family, who I obviously never met, died. Almost all of them in Auschwitz. A few other extended family members made it out. My father, the entire family came here with no money and without speaking any English. And my father went to sort of an employment center and tried to articulate that he was learning how to be a plumber in Germany so he can be a plumber here. So he got a job cleaning toilets. As he said, he started his life in America shoveling shit. And so he was cleaning outhouses at construction sites. And in December of 1941, he was working and was listening to the radio while he was working and heard that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And so he, the next day, went and enlisted in the US Army, trained in the southern part of the United States, became an American citizen in Alabama, and ultimately landed on D-Day, was one of the first soldiers to land on Omaha Beach. He was an underwater demolitions expert, which is a group of the military that eventually became the Navy SEALs. And he blew up the metal implements that the Germans had placed on the beach to impede the Allied ships from landing. Fought all across the European theater, fought in the Battle of the Bulge. He liberated a concentration camp. He liberated Bergen-Belsen, and was able to go back to his hometown and have what he called the Bürgermeister, which is like a mayor, set up a Jewish cemetery for all of the Jews who had died or had been displaced in his town, which was a bit of, was I think comforting for him. And he survived the war, came back. The rest of his life was much happier than the first 23 years. In 1990, he had me at 68 years old, and more or less lived a pretty wild life. But he had a very different experience, you know, than many other people. Obviously, Aaron was in a concentration camp. My father was fortunate enough not to be. His brother Jules, who was 2 years younger than he was, won't talk about the experience. He is incredibly traumatized to his entire childhood. He won't be around people speaking German. My father spoke about it all the time. When I was a kid, he would come to all of my classes, and every year there was, you know, bring Kurt Kahn to school day, and he would tell his war stories and his stories of the Holocaust. And he, I think much like Aaron, was full of gratitude and life and joy, and was able to overcome all of the hardships that he was forced to endure in the early part of his life. And despite all of that, was an incredibly kind and warm human being, which I think is a testament to the will of sort of humanity. I don't think that's a Jewish trait. I'll share sort of three things that he always impressed upon me, having lived through that. He and I were incredibly close. One was that the most important thing in life is knowledge and education, because that's something that no one can ever take away from you. And so he didn't get to go back to school. He left school when he was 11 years old. And that was honestly the most traumatic part of his entire childhood. You know, his entire, other than his parents and his brother, his entire extended family died. All of his friends were killed in concentration camps. His childhood was taken away from him. But nothing hurt more than not having an education, and that was painful for him until the day that he died. I'd say the other thing that was very important to him, and I think this is a little controversial, a lot of people feel very differently about this, is that he, relative to a lot of other people, did not harbor a ton of ill will against Germans writ large. He felt that the Nazis perpetrated the Holocaust, and he liked to distinguish between the Germans and the Nazis. He was a beneficiary of great generosity from many of German neighbors, German friends, as he was trying to round up enough money and enough resources to get his family out. They fed him, they kept, you know, they stayed on top of the family as well as they could. And so he was incredibly grateful for that. So it was very important for him, or to him, for me to believe that this was the Nazis and not the Germans. And I would say maybe and I will say that that plays out. My fiance is German. Unfortunately, he never met her, but I certainly took that to heart. And the last thing is he was very proud of, our entire family was very proud of being German, and our German Jewish heritage. And when they left Germany before, as my father would say, this crazy Hitler guy showed up, they felt like Germany was the pinnacle of liberal cosmopolitanism. They were leaders in intellectual pursuits, in art, in culture, in so many ways. And he always felt if it could happen there, it could happen anywhere. And so that creates a little anxiety in me, makes me a little nervous. But it just makes me aware that, anti-Semitism is not an economic issue or any other kind. It's a form of racism, and it's something that Jews have endured for a long, long time, and we have overcome, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. But it makes for a little bit of uneasiness for those of us who are aware or are sensitive to the fact that it can happen to anyone.
Matt, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Kyle.
So, move the spotlight. So, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank Zadie, and I want to thank Matthew, and I want to thank both of your families for your openness to share with so many people. Both of you not only, joined in on tonight, but asked to be open and share this with other people externally. And there are people outside of our school that are joined here tonight listening. What I have some personal things to share. I had a journal with me when I was with Zadie in Poland, and I have an excerpt from there that I guess I'll share, and a picture that was recently released that I think may also pose a moment to discuss. What I'd like to do, since Zadie's still here, and Matt's here, and Matt, you can take or not questions, up to you. But if anyone else has questions, then just please, I think, this is the point where we wanted to discuss, and I will add in a piece from my experience in this conversation. But for anyone that has a question, in particular, Zadie's still here, but it could be pointed at anyone. Just raise your Zoom hand. That's the easiest way. So if anyone has a question, now is a good time to raise your Zoom hand. Okay. Adam?
Hi, thank you. That's a question for Zadie. Matt talked about a lesson from his father that his father impressed upon him that it could happen to it could happen today. Do you believe that too?
Zadie, the question was, do you believe what happened to you in the 1930s and 40s and the Jews in the 1930s and 40s in Europe and Nazi Germany? Do you believe that could happen today?
Believe what?
Do you believe the Holocaust could have happened again? Do you believe what you went through could happen again in the world?
Yes, in Europe it could happen again, because the Ukrainians, the Polacks, they're worse than the Nazis.
Zadie, can you explain why you said that? Because a lot of people here are missing some context for why you feel that way.
Look, you got to remember, when you were all in a group, like we live in a group, and one is successful and one is a loser, the loser makes up stories and finds a lot of losers with him, and so they cannot go find the majority, but they pick individuals, and the Jews are a small minority, especially today in Europe. Therefore, it's going to happen. In America, it's not going to happen because America, you're afraid. If you start against the Jews, the Chinese are going to worry. Maybe they're next. The Chinese, the Koreans are next. So it can happen. But Europe, it can happen.
So this question was asked to me and someone else also earlier. I apologize. It was of time, asked about Holocaust denial. And Zadie, I think a lot of people have diverging views on what you just said. I'm just going to share a picture. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again just for one moment. So a lot of very complicated and bad things have happened over the last many years. Anti-Semitism in the United States is at an all-time high in the last 5 years in terms of also violent attacks against Jews, not just one-off attacks against, you know, an entire synagogue and some psychopath, but I mean, you know, hundreds and thousands of attacks each year. And this is a picture from very recently. This is a picture of the attack on Washington a few weeks ago. And this is a picture that has been circulating Twitter and Instagram. And there were plenty of people that were not caught on picture that were this fanatical and wearing this type of clothing. And this was 3 weeks ago. So, you know, Zadie, I hear your views, and with the utmost and solid respect, but someone is wearing a Auschwitz sweatshirt. On this, Zadie, on the sweatshirt, it says Camp Auschwitz.
Yes.
So I think they're just, you know, I wanted just to share, I think there are many diverging views with this in terms of if this could happen again. And I will say on behalf of some family members of mine that are not here tonight, that they do not feel safe. Many people here feel, you know, safe in certain environments and not safe in others. But knowing that I have close friends and family members that never feel safe ever because of what happened is a true reality. So Zadie, I appreciate your optimism, but I just wanted to open the fact that there's a spread of views on this.
You're going to find individual nuts in Israel too. Don't they have just, they broke into a synagogue and he ripped the Torahs up? This happens, but I'm talking to go out the government. That'll never happen in America.
Okay. Thank you. If anyone else has a question, you can raise your hand. Okay, Kathy, I'm going to call on you.
This is a question to both Zadie and Matt, and thank you so much for allowing us to take
Kathy,
this evening.
just
yes.
slow down.
Okay, I wanted to say thank you for letting us have some of your time this evening. My question to you is, how do you think about all of us in this room and all of us in general in the world, whether we are from the Jewish descent or related to someone who survived the Holocaust or not? What do you think about our individual responsibility to remember your stories?
Zadie, could you hear?
Yes, I heard. I see it. As far as I'm concerned, you see, in the Jewish prayers, we don't say, go kill all the Christians. Don't go kill all the Muslims. No, we put it in. You protect the Jews, the people who are circumcised, and also the people who are not circumcised. So you got to remember, we do not share the killings of people. No, I saw a lot of horrible things in my life. I saw babies, children who were murdered for no reason or other. But I couldn't go and kill a German child or even a Ukrainian child. Even today. I mean, it's only an animal could do that.
Matt, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I would just say to forgive but never forget.
You can't forget. I dream about it every day. There's no such a thing forget. You know, the normal world has a father, a mother, sister, and brother. I had nothing. So you can't forget. The only thing you must remember, you have a conscience. And there's a lot of cubicles in there. And when you got to make a living for a family, the past goes away and aside. Soon as we are not working, it comes back upon you and haunts you. Why was I alive? My older brother is gone. He was a year older, taller, handsomer than I. So you can't forget that. And I don't want to forget it.
If there's one last question. Okay. Zadie, we have one more question for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Zadie, for sharing your story. My question for you is, what does forgiveness mean to you, and how can we forgive?
Well, I'll put it on. Forgiveness means you're sorry what you have done. But according to Jewish side, you could get forgiveness for anything. But if you take a life, the only forgiveness is that you got to go to. So the people who are killed, they can't protect themselves. But the people who did the killings, they must die. And if you want to hear a little, I'll tell you a little better story. You know, what's the name? Spain. The Jewish community at one time controlled Spain. They worked for the king. Then the queen was influenced by a priest to force all the Jews to convert. If you're not convert, you got to leave the country. They were all over. Holland, the Dutch opened up the land. Egypt opened up. The ones who didn't want to leave had to convert. Now, if they converted and they found out he is not sincere, they burned him at the stake. Now let me get to the conclusion. It says, see, nobody gets away for killing people. Spain was a big country, a powerful country. They discovered America. America was split in half. Half is Anglo and half is Latinos. The Latinos never found peace in their life. They're still killing each other. Okay? And they got more natural resources than the North America. That shows you nobody gets away with it. The only thing that's not fair, why should the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, well, that you got to take up with the Lord, not with me.
Well, Zadie, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
And if you people ever get lost to Philadelphia, come and see it. I'll even give you a glass of water to drink and a shot of scotch.
Well, it seems like you have a lot of people that are heading down on the train to Philadelphia. We'll make sure we'll wait till everyone's healthy by you. But thank you so much for sharing with us and sharing with me again your story. We really appreciate this, and we hope that we have a chance to speak with you again in good health. And we hope that you sleep well and just many, many days and years of health and happiness with your beautiful family.
Well, thank you very much. The same to you. I only want to live a couple more years to be my youngest bar mitzvah from one of my grandchildren. And then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
To my classmates and those who are still here, there are a lot of resources out there to learn more. If you would like to find any, or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're lucky that on the SAS, there's a handful of members who have worked at other organizations, such as Cindy Spungen, who's on with us today, who helped put together the event tonight, who have a lot of experience in this area of education. So should you have any questions or should you want to speak, really feel free to reach out, and happy to give you the resources you need. What we wanted to do was just to have an open forum for dialogue and questions. If anyone has to go, and clearly people do, it got late, totally okay. But if anyone wants, we're going to, I'm just going to sit here. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer. My wife, Samara's family has a lot of experience as well with the Holocaust. Matthew's still here. Cindy's still here. So if anyone has questions or wants to talk, I don't know how to unmute Cindy is, can we lift the mute restriction? Is that available option, Cindy? And if anyone would like to talk, we're going to stop the recording now. Or I'll